Welcome everyone to this week's bi-weekly Wednesday webinar. And this week we are talking about e-bikes, everything you need to know about e-bikes. In fact, with me this evening is Steve Gerhartz. He's a board member and treasurer of Seacoast Area Bike Riders, otherwise known as SABR, S-A-B-R. And that's a diverse group of riders in the Seacoast area of New Hampshire and the southern part of Maine as well. He's also a community spoke for the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. So he has been trained to work as an advocate to make Maine and the Seacoast area of New Hampshire a better place for biking and walking. And of course, his expertise for tonight's webinar is due to the fact that he owns a bicycle shop that specializes in electric assist bicycles. It's called Seacoast Bikes, and we'll have that information if you'd like to visit him at the end of this show. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Steve Gerhartz. He's in his shop right now. Thank you, Steve, so much for joining us. Thank you for also staying late in the shop so that you can be somewhere where you can actually show us real bicycles on the floor and give us examples of everything you have, which is pretty much what Steve is going to do. He's going to go through a kind of the ABCs, A to Z maybe, of e-bikes, give us a little bit of a basis for how to understand these things. And then we're going to open it up to everyone that's in this call. What questions do you have? What would you like to know more about? It's going to be up to you to let us know. And to do that, you can use the chat feature in Zoom, or you can raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question. So thank you, Steve. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. You can see me all right there? There we go. Hi. Hi, thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and hopefully help educate people on e-bikes and questions. Little background. I got involved with electric bikes about 5 years ago when a neighbor came up to my house and had this bike with this big thing in the front wheel, and I looked at it and I said, "What is that?" And she said, "This is an electric bike," and I had no idea it was a thing. And the reason she was riding it is she was in very late stages of cancer treatment and had lost a lot of weight and lost a lot of her strength, and was an avid rider her whole life, and this bike allowed her to continue to ride. So I got on it and I took it for a ride, and something clicked, and I just said, yeah, okay, this is something that I think works for everybody for a lot of reasons. So I started researching it and looking at different brands, and 5 years ago was another lifetime in the electric bike world. The products that were available back then are not, most of them are not available now. A lot of the companies are gone. It's a very fast changing space. The technology is changing quickly. So I just started down the path of realizing how truly life-changing these bikes have been, and they certainly have been for me. I mean, I've lost over 40 pounds. All my vitals are better than they've been in years. I'm no kid. I'll be 71 years old in August. And they're life-changing, not only improving your health, but giving you other opportunities to get out and recreate. You know, I go out in the wintertime when it's 25 degrees. I dress like I'm going skiing. It's nice because there's less traffic than in the summer. So anyway, I started down this path, and what I found real quickly is there wasn't a lot out there for people. There weren't a lot of places to buy e-bikes. There wasn't a lot of knowledge. There weren't a lot of companies really trying to move ahead in this space. So fast forward to 4 years later, in June of 2020, I was able to reach an agreement with Specialized Bicycles, Gazelle, Riesenmuller, another brand called Aventon, Urban Arrow, and Yuba, which are cargo bikes, and was able to open a store here in Newington, New Hampshire, and we sell e-bikes exclusively. We don't sell scooters, or we don't do conversions, which we get a lot of people ask for that. That's kind of gone away. The problem with doing a conversion is if you try to put a bike and a battery on a regular frame, those frames are generally not designed to take the stresses and the extra weight. So they can be real problematic, and that's kind of ancient history in terms of doing retrofits. The bikes today are being developed as electric bikes, specifically not as analog bikes with the motors and batteries put on them. So realizing that there wasn't a lot of places to go, having not been real good at retirement, I decided that this was something that I wanted to do. And for the main reason is helping people get back on bicycling. The average customer that comes into our store is late 50s. Many of them, probably over half of them, haven't been on a bike in years, or they don't ride because it's just they don't have the energy or the strength, or they have physical limitations, hip surgery, knee surgery, things like that. We get a lot of people who come in and say that their husband, spouse, partner, whoever is an avid bike rider and they can't keep up, so they're looking for a way to keep up. So there's a lot of use cases for these things, and people are using them as recreational tools. They're using it as daily transportation in many cases. In the urban areas, we're seeing a lot of, especially young families, are ditching the second car because one of the others working from home, so you don't really need it. All you need is transportation to run to the grocery store or the bank or take the kids to school. And we're seeing a big uptick in cargo bikes by young families in the urban areas where they've got good infrastructure to support them. So, it's really been a very, very fast moving space. Somebody asked me, why did you start this in the middle of pandemic? And I really, it never occurred to me that it was during a pandemic. It's just, it was time to do it, and the opportunity was there. And it's been a bit of a challenge, certainly. Supply is a problem, and supply is going to continue to be a problem for some time. And I'll talk about that in a little more detail later. So the basic questions we get when somebody comes in here, we'll get two types of customers that'll come in here. Some people, well, the first question I'll ask is, do you ride a bike now? Or have you done any research? And about half say, yeah, I ride now, but not too much. And yeah, I've done some research, or I haven't done any. And then we do have people that come in that know specifically what they want. They've done the research, they know the brands. They're coming off of a certain type of bike, and they know they've figured out what they want. But for the most part, people aren't really sure. They don't know. So where we start is we explain the basics of electric bikes, and there's a couple of things. Two of the most important are the different motors and drive systems that are used. One of the ones that you'll see a lot of, and this is generally in the sub $2,000 category, are called hub drive motors, where the motor is in the rear wheel. There's a battery, there's a controller on the handlebars. These bikes are generally a little heavier. A lot of them, if not most of them, have throttles. One reason being, from a dead stop, if you don't downshift properly, then you're going to be straining to get going from top gear. The hub drive motors are generally less efficient. They're heavier. They're much less costly to produce, but they're usable. They've been in service in Asia for many, many years. There's millions of these things on the road in all over Asia and in Europe in some places, but hub drives primarily in Asia. They're durable, and they'll give a good long life to a bike, but they generally come with lower quality components because the manufacturers are trying to hit that price point of anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. The second type is called the mid-drive, and that's what the majority of the bikes we sell are mid-drives. And where the mid-drive bike is the motor is mounted between the pedals and the crank area. Those motors are much more efficient. They require much smaller batteries. It's a much more natural bike riding feel. One of the characteristics of a hub drive motor is when you first start out, hub drive motors use what's called a cadence sensor. So the power output is determined by how the computer on the bike is reading how fast you're pedaling, what your cadence is. However, when you go in assist levels, and there's different levels of assist, generally 1 through 5, when you hit an assist level to go up, what it does is it just allows you to go faster. It doesn't give you more power. The power is 100% right out of the gate. So if you go to assist level 1, which is the lowest, and you start pedaling, that bike is going to give you all the power it's got. And it's kind of an abrupt start. They surge a bit. And it's not unnatural. I mean, most people get used to it, but it does unnerve many people. And we make sure that before somebody gets on one, that they understand what's going to happen. We actually make them ride the bike without any power first, just to get a feel for the bike, and then explain, here's how you turn the power on. So it's not quite the same feel as a mid-drive. A mid-drive bike uses what's called a torque sensor, which is sensing how much pressure you're putting on the pedal, and then the power is delivered proportionally to how much pressure you're putting on the pedal. And then there can be settings in different bikes, and different manufacturers have different settings for how much power output you can get at any different level. So those are the two big differences, and the ride characteristics are dramatically different. Generally, the mid-drive bikes are lighter in weight. Most of them do not have throttles. Throttles are actually illegal in Europe, which is where a lot of these bikes come from, and in some places in Asia. But most of them are just regular bicycles with the motor, with the assist built in, without a throttle. There's 3 classes of e-bikes, and I contend there should be 4, but right now, and this is a very fast changing space. There's a lot of change going on in the electric bike space. There's changes going on in state laws and local laws and federal law, all kinds of things. Some of you may have seen there's a bill being introduced right now as part of the of the infrastructure package in the U.S. Congress, to provide a rebate of up to $1,500 for an electric bike purchase. And I think that it can be a bike up to $6,000 or something like that. So there's a lot going on here, and it's changing very quickly.
Hey, Steve, I actually have a slide showing those 3 different types of e-bikes.
Sure, yeah, put it up.
Talk about that a little bit more.
Okay, so Class 1 bikes are pedal assist bikes with no throttle, have a maximum speed, or they give you assist up to 20 miles an hour. You can pedal faster, but you're only going to get assist up to 20 miles an hour. Where this is significant, one of the things people will ask us from time to time, well, where can I ride these and where can't I ride them? So that's really the decision of whoever maintains the venue of wherever you're going to ride. So for example, Acadia right now in the carriage trails dictates that they will only allow Class 1 e-bikes, which means no throttle, up to 20 miles an hour. We expect that that'll change at some point, because that's like telling somebody that has a high performance car that they can't ride on the interstate because their car will do 150 miles an hour. It's not the bike, not the car or the bike, it's the rider. Class 2 e-bikes, same assist up to 20 miles an hour. However, they have a throttle. Most of these Class 2 bikes you're going to find, the vast majority of them are going to be the sub $2,000 price range. Heavier bikes, generally they're on the range of 60 to 70 pounds. And the throttle is more of a feature to help you get going from a dead stop than anything. It's not, we find, and our customers tell us this after they've had bikes with throttles for some time, that they don't really use it much. I mean, you use it as a bike, you use it every now and then, but it's not really a significant feature unless you have the physical limitations that it can help you get going. In that case, then they're valuable. And then the third is the Class 3, which are pedal assist only with or without a throttle. So actually the graphic here is a little misleading. We do have e-bikes that are Class 3 with throttles. So that's why I'm saying there should be 4. That should be Class 3 would be a up to 28 miles an hour of assist without a throttle. Class 4 should be up to 28 miles an hour with a throttle. And I expect we're going to see that change at some point in time. And then the motor power up to 1 horsepower, 750 watts. The one question we get is, well, how big of a battery do I need? Well, then the answer to that is, well, what kind of motor do you have? If you have a hub drive motor, which is less efficient, you're going to need a bigger battery. The mid-drive motors can use a much smaller watt-hour battery.
I'll stop sharing this now. Thanks for going through that. We also have that poll sitting around too, if it would be helpful to send it out at some point.
What is that?
Here, I'll put it right now. This might steer our conversation. So for everyone viewing, why are you interested in e-bikes? And
right.
This kind of hits to why you were interested in attending tonight's poll.
Right.
So, is it because you just want to travel further, get more distance, go 50 miles instead of 30? Do you have a physical limitation that's preventing you from enjoying a bike or actually being able to pedal comfortably at all? Or do you want to keep up with your spouse, significant others, children, parents, other friends? You can choose.
Right. The other issue or the reason that people give us is where they live, and of course, this is all over New England, is hills, where an electric bike can help you manage hills and wind, especially if you're anywhere near the coast. Wind can be a factor. So those are really the basics.
We can clump those types of things into the first response here, so I can travel further, so I can get up hills more easily.
Right.
All right, there's a pretty clear direction here, so I'm going to close the polling. Thank you, everyone, and then I'll share the results so everyone can see them. So it looks like we have about 70% want to just be able to travel further, get up those hills more easily, go against a headwind without dreading every pedal stroke.
Right.
46% have a physical limitation, and 23% would like to be able to keep up with friends and family more easily.
Right.
Does those seem pretty reflective of what you see for people coming into your shop, Steve?
Yeah, one of the hills issue is certainly significant, but one of the things we get from feedback from our customers is, and they almost all say this, that since buying an electric bike, they're riding more frequently and they're riding further. And in many cases, especially if you live in an area where you can access grocery stores, post office, schools, whatever, many people are just leaving the car at home, sitting in the driveway, and they're utilizing the bike, which is obviously, it's better for you physically, it's better for the environment, it's much less expensive, and so there's just so many benefits to these things. I started to say at the beginning, the main reason for starting this store was to give people a way to experience electric bikes and to learn more about them and understand them. Because what's happened is, if you go back 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, most bike stores that you go into, and this is much more prevalent here in the New England area than it is, especially in the warmer climates. Most of the bike shops you go into, if you went into a bike shop 4 years ago and you said, I have an electric bike, can you work on it? I just need a tune-up. They say no, they don't want to touch it. And what's happened is electric bikes have become a disruptor in the bike industry. It's changing the face of the entire industry. It's changing the way the bike industry operates. And it's not going to slow down. It's actually, our primary brand is Specialized Turbo, which is their electric line. We sell Specialized, but we don't sell analog Specialized. All we sell is their electric line. And what they've told us is, right now they believe that e-bikes are about 25% of their overall business. Now they're in 160 countries. By the end of 2023, they expect that to be about 40%. And by the end of 2024 into 2025, they expect that worldwide, 1/2 of all their new bicycle sales are going to be electric bikes. And they're making a huge investment in this. And we don't see any evidence that that's going to be otherwise. So, to be able to see people come in here and get on a bike and then hear the stories about how much they're enjoying it and how they're feeling better, and they're coming back from a surgery or whatever it is, that's been the main motivation and the most satisfying part of doing this. And we've got a real strong team here. I've got my technical people here have all got years of bike experience. They're constantly going through training for the electrical parts of it, which are fairly relatively few problems we run into. I mean, if any, we'll have every now and then somebody will come with a mountain bike that the motor's not working. And then when we find out, we start querying and we find out it was under water 3 feet or something. But for the most part, these bikes are not problematic. They're not prone to difficulties or quirks. And I'm speaking about the over $2,000 price point. And that's gonna continue. When we talk about, one of the other things we'll talk about right now, people will say, well, do you have them? And do you have bikes? And one of the things that we're seeing, and this is not only true in the bike world, but in a lot of other items that are, people purchase. The United States is on this buy and binge right now, and we're buying everything, and we're buying a lot of stuff from Asia, and I'm, bicycles, refrigerators, I mean, you name it, it's crazy. And so what's happening is there's shortages all across the board. There's raw material shortages, there's component shortages, and things like this. And what's happened is, and this has been somewhat precipitated by COVID, which this bike boom, if we'll call it that, is a worldwide phenomenon. This isn't just in the United States. This is happening worldwide. Electric bikes were on the uptick anyway before COVID. This has just accelerated it. But what's happening is the component manufacturers are unwilling to increase their production capacity. Because they believe, and I think rightly so, that this surge that we're seeing now is going to be temporary. Now, temporary doesn't mean a month or two. The temporary means it's going to, in another 2 to 3 years, things will settle down. The equilibrium between demand and supply is going to start to balance out. Right now, demand is skyrocketed high, supply is way low. But because the manufacturers are unwilling to increase their production capacity, that's where we're running into all these problems where we can't get components, we can't get certain it's across the board. I have an easier time getting bikes than I do car racks to carry bikes. And this isn't going to go away anytime soon. But what they are doing is the component manufacturers are changing what they're doing, where they're not increasing their production capacity or tooling, but they're focusing more on the higher price components simply because there's more margin. So what we're going to see happen, and we're already seeing it right now, is in the sub $2,000 category of electric bikes, components are going to become non-existent. So a lot of these online bike companies that sell only consumer direct online, they're not going to be around in a year, because they're going to go to a manufacturer like Shimano and say, hey, I need to buy 10,000 derailleurs for this bike I want to build. And they'll say, well, that's nice, because we just sold Cannondale, 350,000. And, when they get theirs, you'll get yours, which means you're not going to get yours. So, I caution people, and we get a lot of phone calls, and I recognize, the $2,000 for a bike seems like a lot, but I was kind of surprised because I wasn't in the bike business. There's a lot of analog bikes that are $5,000, $6,000, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000. This isn't just electric bikes. There's all kinds of bikes that are expensive. But what I caution people is if you're looking for something online, from what I see right now, you're really playing roulette. You run the risk of the company not being around in a couple of years, or if not sooner. Replacement parts, warranty parts, are in many cases non-existent and going to continue to be. So, it's problematic, because there are a lot of people that want to get on these things that just aren't in a position to spend $3,000 and $4,000 and $5,000 or even more. We've got some bikes here that are $12,000, $15,000. And it's keeping a lot of people out. And again, but that's temporary. But if you are looking at an online brand, you need to be real careful about and recognize that what you're probably going to be in for is if you need some component down the road. Now, a lot of components are interchangeable, brakes and cables and things like that. But the electronic components, the controllers, the displays, and the batteries, the battery cradles, are generally specific to the brands, and that's where people are going to start and are already starting to have a hard time sourcing. So, it's just beware in that online consumer direct purchase. Definitely, you don't want to buy anything off Amazon. I mean, we have people coming in here all the time that have bought a $600, $700, and $800 bike on Amazon, and it works great for 2 weeks. And then they bring it in here and they say it won't turn on, and there's nothing we can do to help them. We have no way to diagnose the problems. Within, we could do it, but the cost of diagnosing the problems would exceed the cost of the bike. So I just, I put that out there as a caveat. Be very, very careful where you go to look to purchase these bikes. So what else?
So we have, I think it would be great to see some different, what types of bikes exist.
Sure.
And then we also have some questions that maybe we could follow. Once you're done showing us what types of bikes are out there, then what about maintenance? Because that's a question that's come up. What kind of maintenance do we need to expect when we own an e-bike? And is it different based on what type of e-bike do we have?
Well, let me tackle that one now. It's, first of all, they're bicycles. They have pedals, they have brakes, many of them have derailleurs, though we are seeing in the higher level of quality or higher price bikes, we're seeing a lot of internally geared hubs now. We're seeing carbon belts as opposed to chains. One of the maintenance issues with an electric bike is because the motor puts more stress on the chain and cassette. You will go through chains and cassettes a little faster than you will on a non-electric bike. But all in all, for maintenance, it's a bicycle, and any bike shop can fix a bicycle for the most part. Where you run into the electrical part of it, that's really not maintenance so much. There's really nothing to do to the motor, to the controller. The batteries really, the only thing with batteries that you want to pay attention to is all these batteries now are lithium ion, and that's one of the things that's accelerated the space. Is lithium ion batteries have really become much better in quality in the last 2 to 3 years. The battery cell quality is much better. But one characteristic of lithium ion is it doesn't like cold weather. So when up here, obviously, when we get cold snaps during the wintertime, you want to make sure that your bike, your battery at least, and just about all of these, if not all of them, some don't, but most of them, the batteries are removable. We do have some of the higher priced road bikes that are not removable. So in cases like that, you want to be able to store them in the winter someplace where it's warm, because the cold will deteriorate the battery and it will affect the battery life. That's really the only maintenance to do to the electronic part of it. The rest of it, it's a bicycle. Make sure the tires are pumped properly. Make sure that you lube in the chain if you have a chain. You tune it up every so often, depending on how hard you ride it. Of course, mountain bikes like that, they get a little harder use, are going to lead a little more. But for the casual, regular, recreational rider, there's no more maintenance to one of these than there is to a regular bicycle.
When there's a hub-driven motor, is it trickier to get the rear wheel off and back on?
Yes, that's one consideration. Well, it's not trickier, but you do have to disconnect the motor. And I've been in shops where mechanics just don't want to touch it because they're afraid if they put it together wrong, there's going to be a problem, and that certainly has happened. But you do have to disconnect the wiring to the motor on a hub drive motor, where a mid-drive motor, you drop in the cassette and the wheel like any other bike. Is no difference.
Cool. Well, I think it would be helpful then to show us some of your bikes. Maybe,
sure.
Maybe unless anyone else out, as Steve is showing us bikes, everyone, feel free to pause us by asking a question if you want to know a little bit more, or if you don't understand what Steve is showing us. But maybe, Steve, if you want to start with something that's at the budget end, and then slowly go uphill, but slowly go somewhere where the bikes become more expensive. I don't know.
Okay.
And if for everyone else out there, if you're interested in a commuter that's really affordable, or if you want to have a mountain bike or anything in between, let us know so that Steve can spend a little bit more time talking about that type
Yeah,
of bike.
right. I'm happy to take emails or phone calls anytime and help guide people and give you advice. I mean, the one thing I have done in the last 4 years is I've studied this space to a degree that's probably bordering on, psychotic or something. I mean, I spend a tremendous amount of time studying what's going on in the electric bike world and in the bike industry in general. What you have to do in a position like this. So, and I'm very happy to share information. I was actually thinking before I did this, if anybody comes in here to try to buy a bike because they think I'm doing this as a promotional thing, I'm actually going to charge you 5% more. So I'm not really going to do that. But anyway, this isn't about selling bikes. This is about helping people get on the right bike. And we do see from time to time, people get on the wrong one. So I'll give you an example. Here's a bike. This is one brand we sell. This is an Aventon, and this is our under $2,000 price point. And this is kind of a cruiser, upright, hub drive motor, 500 watts nominal, which means the lowest output's 500 watts and it goes up to 750. These are 8 speeds. They all have disc brakes. Rim brakes are non-existent for pretty much, for the most part, in the electric bike world. Just about everything now has disc brakes. And these bikes are at about the $1,500 category, something like that. And they make a number of different models. They make that cruiser style. I'll show you over here. This is one of the things people are starting to like are these fat tire bikes. So these bikes have a 4-inch fat tire. This is a 20-inch fat tire. We have some with 26. I've got one around here somewhere. This one actually folds. So people will say, well, can I get a folding bike? I'm going to pick it up and throw it in a car. Well, the reality is these types of folding e-bikes weigh somewhere between 65 and 70 pounds. And you're going to fold it and put it in your trunk once, and then you're not going to want to do it again. You'll either get a rack or put it someplace. This is another Aventon. This is called a Level. This is a commuter bike. These are 1,800, something like that. They come with racks, fenders. Again, all hub drives. Motors are in the down tube and very serviceable. We've sold hundreds of these things and people love them, and they're, problematic. Not at all. I mean, every now and then we'll have somebody come in with an issue, but for the most part, they're pretty simple.
What type of range do those less expensive bikes usually get?
Good question. That's one of the questions we get. Well, how far can I go? Well, as a general rule, what we'll tell people, doesn't matter what you buy, hub drive, mid drive, doesn't really make a difference. You can expect to go 25 to 40 miles on a charge. And that's normal temperatures, above 45 degrees, not using assist all the time, not using the throttle all the time, just on average. Now, it's what you find is the more you ride it and the more you familiarize yourself with the difference between using the derailleur or shifter versus the assist, you can learn how to manage them better. And over time, what happens is not only are you getting stronger just from riding the bike, but you learn to manage the two better, and your range will extend. So right now, Eric, just for an example, if you and I were on the same bike on the same day, we weighed the exact amount, we were riding the same route, everything was the same, I'd go further than you simply because I understand more about how to manage the power versus the derailleur. And that's something, as time goes on, people recognize. And we have people that on a single charge on some of these bikes, 60, 70 miles, which is, think about how far that is. That's not a trip to the store. That's a hike. For the most people, your butt will wear out before the bike battery will.
It sounds like hypermiling, something that people do in their cars.
Oh yeah. Well, we have people do it on bikes. We have some of these bikes. I'll show you. We have, for example, these are road bikes. Regular drop bar road bikes. They're all electric. These bikes weigh 36, 37 pounds, and they can accept what's called a range extender battery that can give you over 100 miles of range. But these are, again, these are road bikes. And then we have something like these. These are called the Vado SL. These are more gravel bikes, more of a fitness bike. The people that buy these are generally people that have ridden for some time, and they've gotten to a point where they just need that little bit of extra. We've got a number of customers. Actually, I just sold 2 of these a couple of weeks ago to a doctor and his wife that live up in Freeport. He's a cardiologist. He's 86 and she's 83. And they're lifelong bike riders, but they just, it's their physical limitations now have made them had to stop riding a regular bike. So, we see a lot of people in here, 70, 75, 80, 85 years old, getting on bikes like that. So
what kind of cost? So for that for the electric road bike, that 36 pounds is really appealing. Does it come with a really high price tag, I'm assuming, as well?
The drop bar bikes, these start, well, this brand Specializes, which one of the reasons we went with Specializes, we feel I feel that they're probably 2 years ahead of the rest of the industry in the technology. They've got an engineering center in Switzerland where they road test these things. They've got wind tunnels. It's a whole thing they got going on over there. So they really spend a lot of time in the development and production of these things and the design of them. These bikes start about 6,000, which people say 6,000 for an e-bike, but if you go on a Specialized website and you look at the non-electric bikes, they have a whole range of these without motors that are 6,000. So it's not, it's not like it's that much more for an e-bike. In many cases, it's actually less. Some of these Vado SLs, these start at about 3,500, I believe, somewhere around there. And this is actually probably the most requested model that we have of these, the Vado SLs, SL meaning super light. So.
You were going to show us that cargo bike, and then we have a question also whether recumbent bikes are available. If you have one in the shop, it'd be really fun to see it as well.
Yeah, no, we don't have one, and I'm actually researching that right now because we do have people that come in here. I had a fellow come in here the other day, a week or so ago, who has Parkinson's, and he came in with a walker, and he was looking for a trike of some sort, and a lot of there are recumbent trikes right now that are pretty good. And what he was explaining to me is that when you have Parkinson's, the motor skills that you use for walking are different than for riding a bike. So he can ride a bike, but he just can't walk. And so that's one of the areas that we're looking into real hard right now to try to find something. The problem is the quantity. There's not enough demand for that type of bike for a manufacturer to put any real money into the development of them. But there are some small ones out there, and the name of them off the top of my head is escaping me, but it's something we're looking at hard. Look at Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson came out with the trike, 10 years ago or something like that, for the old guys like me that are a long time Harley riders. And you get to a point where trying to hold 900 pounds up on 2 wheels gets a little tough. Okay, so cargo bikes, we carry a couple different brands of cargo bikes. This is called the Yuba Mundo. This is like an SUV. This bike will carry 450 pounds. And we see a lot of people will buy one of these. They'll hook up a trailer. They'll put a couple child seats on the back. These are basically car replacements. Then we have there's different versions of it. That's called the long tail. Then we have the front loaders, these are called. This is companies called Urban Aero. These are made in the Netherlands. These are all Bosch motors, mid drives. This is called the Bosch family. We'll sell these to people that have some young kids and they use them to shuttle the kids to school or go to the market or whatever. This is the long one. Then they have one they call the shorty. And what they also have is this one right here. This is a cargo. And this is a commercial application. Let me see if I can open this thing up. Yeah, it's locked. This is the big cargo box. And we're seeing more of these in the cities and urban areas being used for delivery. We're going to continue to see a lot more of that. This is also an Urban Aero.
What kind of,
go ahead.
Yeah, what does something like that weigh, out of curiosity?
This bike with the box on, it's probably about 120 pounds, which is pretty heavy. Now, most e-bikes, I'll show you this one. This is a 4-inch fat tire. This is made by Aventon. This is a fairly new model that they came out with. These are just under 2,000. This bike weighs 70 pounds. You don't really notice it when you're on it, but where it's problematic, and one of the issues with an electric bike is, how do you transport it? And the best way to transport it, if you have a pickup truck, that's easy, but then you got to get it up in the pickup truck and down. But you want to use a rack where the wheels sit in a bucket, as opposed to a traditional rack where the rack kind of hangs off the back of the car, and maybe it leans against the window or the trunk, and you hang the bike. That's just not a way to transport an electric bike. You want a rack that'll hold, for most of them. Now, if you get into the lightweight, those road bikes and things, it's not as problematic. But for most e-bikes, you want a rack that has the buckets that the wheels sit in, and that go connect to the car to the trailer hitch.
Do you have any, like, for all of us who are listening and maybe feel shocked that these weigh so much more than an analog bike? You said, like, it doesn't really affect the riding so much. It's only when you go to, like, transport it. Is that
right?
Do you have any other, like, feedback that you could give, that you could provide to us, so that we don't feel like we're overwhelmed? Is it overwhelming at all?
In terms of, what do you mean?
Just in terms of handling that weight, moving the bike,
No,
steering it, balancing it at a stop sign.
no. Once you're on it, it's once you're on the bike and moving it, if if you have balance issues, then that could become a problem. But for the most part, you come up to a stoplight like any bike, and you put your feet down on the ground, or you slide off the saddle, and you stand on both feet. One of the things that we see is about 70% of all the e-bikes being sold right now are what's called a step through, or which we used to call back in the day a girl's bike. That's really not the case anymore. So this is the bike that I ride right now. This is a Riesen Mueller Homage, which is a step through. And the reason I do it is, at my age, I don't have the ability to throw my leg over like I did so many years ago. And it's not the getting on part that's hard, it's the getting off part, especially if there's something on the rear rack, or I have bags or something like that. But about 70% of electric bikes that we're selling are step throughs. So it's either a step through or a step over. So, like, this is a specialized turbo Como. This bike weighs right at 50 pounds. These are class 1. It does come in a step through and a step over. There's one behind it there. This is more of a comfort bike. It's more of an upright cruiser style position. Very comfortable. This is the kind of bike you'll see up in the carriage roads. And then you have a commuter style bike, which is a little more aggressive, a little more forward leaning, gets you a little more aerodynamic. Tires are generally a little thinner. Can still be used on trails or packed gravel. You're not going to go on beach sand with them. Which you can on some of these fat tire bikes. Like on these, you drop the tire pressure down on these about 10 pounds. And a lot of people now are riding these in the snow. We see a lot of people on the rail trails this winter riding these, where they'll drop the tire pressure down, or in some cases, you go to the beach on soft sand and 10 pounds of air pressure, and you can pretty much ride on anything. So, and then we have, this is a very fast growing segment. These are mountain bikes. These are made specifically for off-road use. And there are people that commute on them and use them as everyday bikes, but generally they don't have fenders, they don't have racks or anything like that. And these are becoming very, very popular. There's a lot of new trails being opened all over the country, and New England is really starting to get ahead of the rest of the country. There's a big project going up in North Conway right now to expand the mountain bike trails. There's a lot of these clubs are starting to allow electric bikes. And as I was starting to say earlier, if you went back a few years ago, there was a real bias against electric bikes from the people in the bike industry, and there still is to some degree. There's a lot of bike shops that are just resisting the change. They're resisting the disruption. And my guess is that they're either going to have to recognize it and go with the flow, or they're probably not going to be in business in another year or two, because this is without question where it's going. What else can we show you here? This is a Gazelle. These are made in the Netherlands. This is a very upright company's been in business 130 years, mid-drive Bosch motor, very comfortable. The Netherlands, I think I read recently that 60% of all new bike sales in the Netherlands are electric. And that's a growing number. So we're going to see more of that. So these are some Gazelles. And these bikes generally run somewhere between 2,500 and 4,000, right in that range. And then we have, we just started carrying these. These are called Reese and Mueller. These bikes are hand built in Germany. These are, we'd call these the Mercedes. They're all Bosch mid-drive motors, very high quality. And Reese and Mueller creates bikes as automobile replacements. They're not, we're specialized in Gazelle and others. It's a bicycle, and it's great. You ride a bicycle. These bikes are built to replace an automobile, so they're basically weather resistant. They're very sturdy. They're very solid. A lot of fun to ride. They're a little heavy, but they're like I say, you replace your car with one of these. There's some
on these bikes, Steve. Can you use a battery extender on any of them? It's specifically one of the questions was regarding the Specialized Vado or Vado, but what about the rest of them? Can you just connect an extra battery that's compatible?
Oh, there's two ways to do it. On some models of the Specialized, and actually on some of the Gazelles now also, you can put an extra battery on. The range, I may have one here I can show you. Yeah, here. On the Vado SL and the Creo SL, which is a drop bar, you can see that little round thing right there. It's a battery that sits in the bottle cage holder, and it plugs in where you charge the battery. So it plugs in right over to the charging port, because these bikes, the batteries are permanent. They don't come out. So you put the range extender battery right there, and that'll give you range up to 100 miles an hour. Some of the other brands,
100,
like
100 miles, right?
100 miles, I'm sorry, yeah. 100 miles an hour.
That'd be quite the speeding.
Yeah.
So just to clarify for everyone, the permanent battery is located in the down tube. That little.
On most of them, they're in the down tube. There are some, and this is changing. Like, so we've got I'll show you a Gazelle here. This is a Gazelle. This is called the Medeo. This one has the battery on the down tube. And this is kind of a little bit older design. It's a little less expensive. But what we're seeing now is the manufacturers are all integrating them into the down tubes. Now, there are some brands, Reese and Mueller being one of them, when they make a model, this one's called the Super Delight. And in Reese and Mueller speak, Super designates two batteries. So this bike has a battery here in the down tube, and it also has a battery in the cross tube. So this gives you, this bike has easily 100 plus miles of range. So they are manufacturing those. And the other thing that's happening is the battery technology itself is improving. So the quality of the cells is getting better. So as time goes on, you're going to see less and less need for that extra battery. And people, there's a phrase called range anxiety. People have range anxiety. How far am I going to go? Am I going to have to walk home? Most of these bikes, with the exception of something like this, that's really heavy, or a cargo bike like this, most of these bikes, if you run out of power, you can still pedal and you can get yourself home. And something like this would be a little tough, but you can ride a regular Specialized or a Gazelle or an Aventon, or even some of the Reese and Muellers with the power turned off, and you can get where you need to go. And a lot of people turn the power off because you get more exercise that way. People that are buying these for exercise use very, very little battery. This is a fairly new model. This is called the Vado SL Step Through. They just came out with this. This one's got the battery in the down tube. You can't put a range extender on it. This bike weighs 35 pounds. You ride this thing without power, you wouldn't know it's an electric bike. It's hard to tell even looking at it.
As you're going through these, Steve, how would you advise listeners to, as far as choosing between type 1, type 2, and type 3? What do you tell your customers generally, like when they come into the store? Is it
You
based
mean
on
the
price?
different classes?
Sorry, that's what I meant. Class 1, class 2, class
Yeah,
3.
it's really what's your use case. Where the class 3, well, the class 1 and class 2 are both going to give you assist up to 20 miles an hour. Where the class 3 is valuable is if you're going to be in traffic. Like if you're riding through downtown Portsmouth or Portland or someplace like that, where you're going to be mixing it up with automobiles, then it helps you stay with the traffic flow. And the other is if you're doing distance. We sold recently 2 recent Muellers to a couple that live in Bend, Oregon. They just retired. They're in their middle 50s. They flew here from Oregon, picked up, this is about a month and a half ago, they're here, maybe a month ago. They picked up 2 recent Muellers here and packed their stuff in the panniers, and they're pedaling back to Bend, Oregon.
That's a great story.
That kind of a use case is a 28-mile-an-hour bike is just going to be that much more useful. The 20-mile-an-hour bike is now all mountain bikes, by the way, are class 1. Mountain bikes are always going to be class 1 bikes. You just don't need to go more than 20. I mean, 20 miles an hour on a bike's pretty fast. It's not, you're not lagging behind. But all mountain bikes are 20 miles an hour. Many of the cargo bikes are 20 miles an hour. You just don't need it. But the best use case for a 28-mile-an-hour class 3 bike is if you're going to be riding with traffic or around traffic or places like that. It's really it is a benefit.
So with these,
what bike that you know of is the lightest e-bike, class 1 e-bike?
Well, that we carry, it would be a Specialized Creo or a Turbo Creo or a Turbo Vado SL. And those bikes are in the middle 30s, depending on whether you have fenders and a rack. I have seen some, I think there's one called the Van Moof. They don't have dealers that I'm aware of. They may, but I'm not aware. But I think they're hitting right around 30 or 32 pounds. And as time goes on, we'll continue to see the weights decrease as the battery cells get better. We're going to see in a few years, we're going to see solid state batteries that'll take another 2 to 3 pounds off. We do have some that are carbon frames that take a little bit of weight off. But for the most part, the lightest right now is going to be in the very low 30s.
Steve, with a road bike, is there a limit to the speed? I mean, you can get really cranking on a road bike with a motor, it seems to me, like up to 30 miles an hour. I just don't understand I guess the laws and so forth of these speeds.
Well, really, I mean, if you're riding on the street, it almost doesn't matter. But to get 28 miles an hour on an e-bike, you're going to be doing your cadence is going to be somewhere 90 or up, and that's moving pretty fast, and that's hard to sustain. Also, especially unless you're a 20-some-year-old potential Olympian. It's real hard to keep your cadence at 70, 80, 90. Well, 70 is not too hard, but above 80 for any length of time is a pretty hard thing to do.
do these bikes and batteries come with different types of warranties than what we would expect on a normal bike? So for instance, if I bought a Specialized from a normal Specialized analog, it would have like a lifetime warranty on the frame and then like a 1, 2, or 3 year on the components. How does the battery and the engine mix into that?
Very, very similar. If you a Specialized program is if you register the bike within 90 days, the frame is a lifetime warranty. The batteries, they go by what they call charge cycles. The higher quality batteries, the Bosch batteries, the Shimano batteries, the Specialized Bros makes their components. They have they'll accept more charge cycles and anywhere from 500 to 1,000 charge cycles. So what a charge cycle is from all the way fully charged to all the way fully discharged. So if you think about that, if it's a 500 charge cycle battery, which is what Bosch suggests, that means every day for 500 days, you'd have to totally deplete your battery and recharge it, which is not really the reality of that happen is not, that's not what happens. I mean, these batteries, for the most part, regular riding, you can expect to get, if you're riding in the winter, you're not going to get as many years, but on average, 3 to 5 years for batteries. And most of them are warranted for 2. But what we've found with the manufacturers that we deal with that handle Bosch or Shimano, or whether it be Specialized or Gazelle or whatever, the manufacturers are right now especially, they'll go the extra mile. We just had a Cannondale mountain bike brought in here a month or so ago, and the motor was shot. Bike was 2018 Bosch motor. Bosch warranted the motor. And the bike had, I don't know, 500 or 600 miles on it or something like that. So the manufacturers in the above $2,000 price range are pretty willing to work with people. As long as it doesn't appear to be any kind of abuse or anything, you can easily expect to get 3 to 5 years out of a battery. And the batteries, depending on the brand, a Bosch battery runs for a 500 watt hour battery is about 750. I think a 400 watt hour battery is about 6. Some of the Specialized batteries get up to be about 1,000, but they'll last long enough. And they'll also, what they're doing is as the batteries are continuing to be developed, they're developing them so that they can be retrofitted in older frames and bikes. So the bike that's being produced today will be able to accept the battery that's being produced 5 years from now.
We have a couple more questions about batteries, and then it is just about 8 o'clock.
Okay.
The last questions we have about batteries are when there are some recommendations I know about regarding electric cars where you're not supposed to charge them above 80% or let them drop below 20 or 30%. How does that work with a e-bike battery? Are you familiar with this type of practice, and do you recommend it?
Yeah, and it all has to do with the battery quality of the battery and the quality of the charger. Again, when you look at the sub $2,000 brands that have the lower quality battery cells and chargers, first of all, there's no way to really know other than if you're standing there looking at the display whether you're at 80% or 100%. Most of these will charge up to 100%, 95%, and then they'll shut themselves off. When you get into bikes like Specialized Turbo or bikes with Bosch motors, they use what's called a smart charger. And the way it works is that you can leave it plugged in. We just tell people as a general rule, if you're going to be gone for a week, unplug it. But for the most part, you can leave them plugged in. They'll shut themselves off when they hit a certain percentage of, generally right around 100%. They'll charge right to 100%. And then what they'll do, and this is important, especially in the colder weather, every couple of hours, the charger will reach out to the bike and see where their charge level is. And if it's not up to 100%, it'll kick itself on and charge the bike and bring it back up. When you're going down, most of, if not all of these batteries now have a feature built into them that's like a kill switch, that when you get to a certain level of battery usage, when you've depleted the battery down to about 30%, they'll just shut off. It won't totally drain the battery to zero. There are features built into these batteries now, even in the sub $2,000 category, they just shut the bike off.
And regarding the charging of them, how
Yep.
fast do they charge? If I have a really long commute, can I plug it in when I get to the office and recharge it?
Oh yeah, what a lot of people do is you buy an extra charger, leave one at the office and one at home. And generally, if you've taken a battery down to, let's say, you're about 30% or 20%, on average, you can expect it's going to take somewhere between 4 to 5 hours to fully charge it, depending on the size of the battery. So the big, the 500 watt hour Bosch battery is going to take a little bit longer than the 320 watt hour Specialized. but on average 3 to 5 hours from a significant discharge. I lost your audio there, Eric.
Thanks, Steve. So thanks, Steve, for joining us. Really quick before we get to the final slide here with Steve's contact information. If you're interested in the bike swap, I don't know that we're going to have any electric assist bikes at the swap, but you never know. We actually are going to have the Great Maine Bike Swap. It's June 26th, later this month, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., Kennedy Park in Portland, which is very close to the Bicycle Coalition of Maine main office down there on Diamond Street. So come check it out if you're interested. If you want more information, you can go to our website, bikemaine.org. And right now, the swap is right there on the front page. You can click on it. Otherwise, to find out about other events, you can click on events and then calendar. And here is the final slide. If you need to get a hold of me for any reason, I manage the education program at the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. And of course, Steve is right here. If you want to contact him, his cell phone is here. I think he's okay with text, but probably email might be the best way. What do you think, Steve?
Whatever works. I mean, I'm, this is what I do. I love doing it. I love being able to help people get on bikes. And I'm happy to answer any and all questions. Email is generally going to be easier. But if you're in a situation where, you're in a store and you're not sure and you're looking at something, you got a question, then pick up the phone, call me, and I'll try to get to it right away and give you some guidance and the best advice I can give you based on the knowledge that I've acquired in the last 4 or 5 years.
All right, well, thank you so much, Steve, for sharing that knowledge with us tonight.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
If you missed part of this or you know someone that really wanted to see it, just take a look in your email. Sometime in the next 24 hours, I'll get a thank you follow-up out there with a direct link to the recording, which will be put on YouTube. So everyone have a good night. Steve, go home and get something to eat.
Thank you. Nope, I have no lunch this week. All right, thanks, guys. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Bye-bye.